Welcome back to everyone. I'm Lilia Mankwa, journalist, host, presenter, and part of the Bonn Institute. I welcome you all back here. So, just introducing myself for those who don't know me or haven't seen me today yet. So, obviously, we're here because this festival is dedicated to constructive journalism and dialogue. And the next panel will look at just that, constructive journalism, and how it actually pays off for audiences and the media, what that actually means, and well, for there's a lot of evidence that actually shows that constructive approaches in journalism and the media are not only good for the society, for example, and not only wanted and requested, but also well worth it for the media institutions and organizations. So on this panel, Manuela Kasper-Claridge, editor-in-chief of Deutsche Welle, is obviously already sitting here, and her primary focuses are on upholding high editorial standards and increasing diversity in DW's reporting. She's also on the Communications and Media Committee of the German Chambers of Industry and Commerce, on the board of trustees of the renowned IFO Institute in Munich, and she also serves on the CV's advisory board. Then we also have Mark Sappenfield, editor at the renowned US-American Christian Science Monitor, currently actually living and working in Berlin. He has also reported from all over the world, like Afghanistan, Pakistan, India, and has covered 7 Olympic Games, and has also reported on NASA. Then we also have Lars Boering, director of the European Journalism Center, a nonprofit for the development of journalism, and he has been involved in arts and photography. He was also managing director of the Amsterdam Art Foundation and is an independent advisor and entrepreneur. He is World Press Photo Foundation and has transformed it into an organization, like he's the manager there, that is more than a contest, becoming a global platform connecting professionals and audiences through trustworthy visual journalism and storytelling. And we have Gordian Fritz, journalist and live reporter at the German news station RTL News. He will also talk about how constructive journalism and constructive approaches in journalism pays off for audiences and the media. Gordian has been working in the field for around 25 years. He has been a writer, reporter, editor, and editorial director for different TV programs and different news stations. And he's also an international correspondent. He has reported on many major news incidents from around the world. From like the earthquakes in Haiti, the civil war in Libya and Syria, the death of Queen Elizabeth II, and currently the war in Ukraine. For many years, Gordian has been intensively involved in constructive and solutions-oriented journalism. So I'm very interested to hear in how constructive journalism actually pays out for the media as well.
Thank you so much for this fine introduction. Thank you, Be Future Festival, having us here. We have good news. There will be no slides with text on the wall. We're just going to talk, and we're going to also invite you to join us in with that. If you have a question, raise your hand and feel free to join in. In the introduction, it speaks about what KPIs indicate that constructive reporting is just good for society, but also pay off for media organizations. Anybody doesn't know what the KPIs are? Okay, we did. You wish, yeah. I like that answer as well. Yeah, we don't tend to talk about business that much unless we talk about what happened to the business models or what is the new business model. Anyway, let's start. I'm just gonna go first one round.
So do people know what KPIs are?
Well, who wants to know what a KPI is? He's very eager to explain what a KPI is.
Can you explain the KPI? Yeah,
yes,
explain.
KPI
is a key performance indicator. And it's just one of the, when you get into talking about business, you get into the world of acronyms. I guess everyone does. We've got them in journalism too. but it's the things that tell you that you're going the right direction, or the things that tell you you're going the wrong direction, that you're watching to see if you're going to make money.
Yeah.
And what are the KPIs for journalism?
They can be different things for different organizations. It depends on what you're trying to do. And I can talk a little.
I thought that's what you're going to explain.
Yes, I think as we get in, we'll probably talk for all of our organizations which ones we're looking at and how they've been affected.
There you go. Thank you. This is great, and thank you for the question and pushing us. Let's start with you. Constructive journalism, solutions journalism. We talk about it as if it's new. For some people, it's very new, and people are still hesitant. But is that new for you? Is it something that you have integrated in your work for already a long time, or not?
To be honest, for us or for me,
Yeah, it's on. And
Yes,
they're all
yes.
on.
Okay.
They're all on.
to be honest, for me and for us at Deutsche Welle, it's not really new, but we focus more on that than we used to do. We started actually something like 10, 12 years ago. We started with constructive formats. For example, an environmental magazine, which was solution and still is solution-based. That means we are describing the problems, but we are also showing solutions. And that was very successful. It was called, that time we started with Eco Africa. Now we have Eco India, Eco Brazil, Eco Tamil. It was so successful in our target regions because people were happy to learn about what the others are doing, how to tackle environmental issues, how to solve, and they even interact with each other and ask us for addresses or emails so that they can contact the people we portray, for example. So we started very early because for me it was very clear, there's so much bad news and only so much you can handle. And for example, my children who are just above 20 years old, and they watch very little news. And when I ask them why, it's too depressing. But they are very well informed and they look for these kind of stories. So I think that's also a good approach for young people to show more constructive-based journalism.
Does that apply to you as well, 10, 12 years ago, or is it also... I'm just curious because sometimes it takes so much time to convince media. We at EJC, we run the Solutions Journalism Accelerator, very big program, it grants training. And very often when I talk to media, they're still, yeah, we tried, and this good news thing and stuff like that. I'm always a bit surprised that it hasn't been... How long is your experience with it?
Interestingly, we were founded in 1908, and my sense is we've been doing it since then. And I've always said that, as this is just baked into who we are. The founder of the Christian Science Monitor said the object of the Monitor is to injure no man, but to bless all mankind. So that's 1908, saying right there, your job is to bless mankind, which to me is constructive journalism. And I've kind of always thought that, but it was very interesting. There was someone who brought to my attention an article that we wrote in 1912, and it was about how to help immigrant communities thrive in the United States. And it was about different programs that were going on in Boston called settlement houses that were intending to help immigrant communities grow roots in the United States so that they can thrive. And it was just great to see that example, that, in 1912, we were looking for solutions and trying to bring those to the surface so that people can see that and replicate them.
Yeah. Without KPIs, I think, then. Yeah.
I'm not sure in 1912 they had KPIs.
No.
They had horse wagons, but that's about it.
Gordian, for you, the same question. I mean, just doing the round, I think we're starting to establish, 1912, but for you, is it also new? It's on your resume that you've been involved for a long time.
I think it's part of the RTL DNA long time. In a different way, like we understand it today. But looking for solutions, a single solution in a problem, that was part of reporting every day at RTL. But we started, like so many others, it was 2017, 2016, to think about more constructive in our main news shows. But to be honest, at the beginning it was not so successful, because we have no idea what is constructive, what is solution journalism at this time. And the editor-in-chief these days, she just came in and said, so we have to do 2 constructive stories every week. And we say, okay, what is constructive? What does it mean? And we had no idea. And so, of course, after a few weeks, it was gone, this idea. And we started again just 5 years ago. And we are absolutely sure that this is the way we have to go in the future. Or now.
Still
again,
now. Yeah. Do you still encounter people that need to be convinced that it's there, or if it's part of your DNA and then somebody comes in and you start talking about it and they say, what is it, or do we?
You mean inside?
Yeah,
inside our media?
yeah. Inside maybe is most important. Yeah.
If you explain what it means, and everybody knows that it's necessary, and just to know it's not just one step. Another step is to do it every day and to make the decision every day to say, okay, we want to do a constructive story, not in a general way, just constructive. And this is the problem, and that's the, part of the work, to convince these guys and the colleagues to say, okay, think different.
Yeah.
If I may add something, Lars, we were talking earlier about your Queen Maxima from the Netherlands.
Yeah.
And a constructive approach how to portray her is to show her as a banker and a financial wit. She was a very well-known banker in the US. She's very experienced, but she's often only portrayed as a beautiful woman. Mm-hmm. And so I think constructive approaches, also even these simple things to show her her personality and the knowledge she has, for example. Yeah, it doesn't have to be always complicated. That's why I wanted to mention it. You know.
Yeah. It's a good example, because it breaks through this mold of portraying the queen that
prejudices.
Cuts the ribbons,
on, you know?
and
look at things. And at persons differently in a different way.
Yeah. Thank you. We appreciate that you appreciate Maxima as well. Mark, I thought you wanted to respond to this,
Yeah, one thing I was going to say is that solutions journalism, constructive journalism, whatever you want to call it, is still relatively new as an idea. And so people are just starting to do it. Not everyone is doing it. We're still in kind of the infant stages of doing this. But I think what you find the longer you go into it is there's no one size fits all. There's no one kind of constructive journalism. Is that just like each individual news organization has its own lens, has its own tone, has its own focus, they can take constructive journalism to fit what they do. And my sense is that if you try and get everyone to do it the same way, there's a sameness to it. It just becomes formulaic. Whereas if you have each paper from its own mission, from its heart, from its soul, say, what does constructive journalism mean for us? You're going to have such a rich array of journalism out there in the landscape. And so the way that we do it might be slightly different than the way everyone else does it. But that's good, because you're then broadening what it can do for the whole marketplace.
Yeah. Is it difficult to... I always say news is a bit the enemy of journalism, because news is always called bad news. Is it journalism? It's easy, never easy, but it's easier to do. But in news, to have something constructive when it happens at the moment, because news is very often bad news.
Yes, and we are struggling. One has to admit that. For example, this week you have lots of bad news. You have the earthquake in Morocco, you have the situation in Libya, you still have the war in Ukraine, and many other places where war is going on. So how do you find a constructive story? That is difficult. But for example, with regards to the earthquake in Morocco, we had a very constructive approach by showing how one can build buildings in a different way, but still in a cheap way, also so that people can afford these kinds of buildings. with certain materials and so on. And that was a constructive story which kind of broadened our perspective. And it was very important that we had this kind of story as well, you know.
Yeah.
And I would say the more you do it, the easier it becomes. It's kind of like a muscle that you exercise. You know, the more you do it, the more you can see those things. And you know, for example, one thing, and again, how do you define constructive journalism? But one of the articles that we did coming out of Morocco, because we had that same question, you know, you look at this and you say, how do you do something that's constructive here? And I think your answer was a wonderful one. We also looked at Morocco's unwillingness to accept aid from certain countries. And you say, well, how is that constructive? When I'm looking at it, I'm saying, what are the things that need to be brought to the surface to move societies forward? And you ask yourself, by Morocco not taking aid from these countries, is it helping itself or is it not helping itself? Is it improving things or is it not? And that can be an open question. You know, we can leave that to the readers to decide. We don't have to decide everything for them. But if you raise that in an honest discussion, and you take what is Morocco, you know, Morocco has obviously a history of colonialism, and you know might very well feel like they want to stand on their own 2 feet. But there's also all this aid that they can get that they're turning their back on. Let's have a discussion about that. I feel like in some ways that's a constructive piece because it's encouraging people to have the debates, the discussions that help us move toward better solutions. Because the whole point of that article is not just to give you information, it's to open a discussion about something that's potentially progressive and have society talk about that.
One of the questions here is, of course, that we're talking about value creation. I mean, a business model without value, there's no money. Money plays a role. Business model. The premises is that it is an audience that wants it. Research shows it. They reflect well to it. But is that also playing a role in the decisions about doing it or not doing it? Is it proven that constructive journalism, solutions journalism, is also good for business? We're talking about content, but I'm moving to business now. What do you think?
It's scary.
I'm sure that the manager is thinking about that. But for us journalists, it's a question about trust and about reality. And I could remember one answer from a viewer when we asked them in a media research what you like, what you don't like. And she said to us, well, look, there are so many bad news. And it's not just a problem that they are bad news, but it's just part of the reality. Because when I leave my home, outside there is not just bad news. There are solutions around me.
That's such an important point.
And you don't cover these stories. So that's, you know, we have to look at the whole reality. And it's the same in Ukraine. Yeah? Anybody thinks, oh, there's no constructive in Ukraine. Oh, there's a lot of constructive in Ukraine. I saw it every time I'm there. It is impossible to not look for constructive stories in Ukraine if you're looking for stories.
Do you have an example of a constructive story?
It's so many, you know. I was just there. I'm now back for 2 weeks ago, and we filmed a longer story about self-made Ukraine, because everybody in the Western Europe think, oh, they're just waiting for the weapons, for the ammunition from the Western. No, they didn't. They're looking for solutions. They built up their own weapons. Not just weapons, rescue vehicles. I saw several things. It was unbelievable. It was incredible, powerful what I saw there. Yeah. And it's just constructive. The same is with volunteers there. Yeah. They did incredible work. Yeah. So, and I could remember one very good example, and I showed every time my colleagues when we discussing about constructive, on how powerful could be constructive journalism. It was just 2 weeks after the war started, and I was in Odessa. And of course, at the central station, it was like so many places. The refugees, they arrived from Mariupol, from Mykolaiv, and it was, of course, mostly women with the children. Yeah, and they were scared about the future. They were scared about what happened with their husbands. So, and we did the story, what happened there. We could see so many crying people, sad moments. Yeah, sad interviews. And when I came back from the train, just filmed the train leave the central station, and I saw a guy in a zebra costume, and I asked, "What happened here? Zebra? What happened here?" And I asked him, and he said, "Oh, we are here just volunteers, and we are just keep an eye on children." I said, "What? Yeah, come in." And there was another waiting room in the same train station, and it was like an oasis. It was unbelievable, because there were volunteers with costumes that was characters from this very popular film Madagascar, and they just playing with the children, and it was the same city, the same situation, a complete other story, because it was constructive, because you could see children laughing, even the mothers laughing, just for a few hours, of course.
Yeah.
But it was the same. It was just a few meters away from the other situation. And we did a story about this waiting room as well, just a day after. And I received so many feedback from viewers, but even from my colleagues. And they told me, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for this story. After 2 or 3 weeks war, it's the first time we see some hope, some good things, constructive.
And that shows that the feedback and the response to it is genuine and real. That should be a good argument to convince anybody that feels
Absolutely.
that it's not. Yeah.
And I think this is true about so much constructive journalism. I mean, there's a metaphor there in what you're talking about, but there's also literally turning your head. You know, if you had just stayed and looked here, all you would have seen was the crying. And that's a completely legitimate news story. That's a news story and we should report it. But if you turn your head and look there, that's a news story too. And you talk about the fullness of reality. I mean, I think that's absolutely essential.
But sometimes you struggle with your colleagues because they have a different perception. They sit at their desk and think, well, there's war. You should show war, and war looks different. Doesn't look like a happy waiting room, you know, with happy children. So sometimes you have to convince your editors, this is the story. I'm here. Please take this story and not the other, you know.
Yeah, that was actually a question I wanted to ask. Is it sometimes difficult that you have to turn your journalist, let's say, onto it, that you have to really say, give me the full perspective? It's a huge generalization, but are too many journalists sort of focusing too much on the conflict and not so much on these solutions? Or
sure, because we journalists think we know how the situation is, even when we are quite far away. And we have to ask ourselves, do we really know? I was asked today by a colleague, you are attending the World Economic Forum on a regular basis. You're obviously only siding with billionaires. And I asked her, have you been there? Of course she wasn't. She was sitting at her desk. And I said, well, there are many NGOs, there are refugees, there are social entrepreneurs, and I talked to these people there. And she was very surprised. So I just mean we have to look behind our perception as well. We have to discuss, broaden our perspective, and get the full pictures, what you were saying, you know, that's very important. But it is sometimes difficult to convince colleagues. Yeah. Sure.
I promised that I would look into the audience, that if, see, there's a raised hand. I felt it. There's two. Oh, okay. We're running. We don't have enough time. Okay. We need... we start with you. We try without a microphone. Otherwise, I will repeat your question.
Where does the constructive story go in a major news bulletin, for example, with RTL? Is it always at the end?
No. No.
Thank you. Thank you.
You know, it's a good question, because it's the same. I remember when I started at TV, and sometimes the editor told me, it's a really bad story. Could you find some good end? These are some maybe 1 or 2 sentences, just good for good feeling for the viewer. And I think that's not constructive journalism. That's not. Yeah, just, and what I say, good news are not constructive. Yeah. Unfortunately, that's not at the end. Of course, sometimes there is, you know, at the end of a news show, maybe what we call it, more popular story, whatever. But this story I told about, it was on the same place where every story will. So no difference.
I mean, and I would say exactly kind of what we've been talking about is so often we in the news have defined news as negative news. That has been news. And then the other has had positive. You just had news and then positive news or something. There's just news. There's just things that happen. And you know, what goes at the top of your show or at the top of your newspaper to me is the thing that is significant and has weight. You know, it has oomph behind it. That can be something that's quote unquote positive or negative. I don't think it has to be either way, but it has to really mean something to your viewers or readers, and it has to be well done. And I think that can be anything. And I think if we just lean toward that has to be something negative, again, we're warping reality. It can be either way.
Yeah.
Why do we always need these labels for a start? We don't
There's just
need
news.
them. Exactly. We need the mix of stories.
Yeah.
That's it.
We just have been so behind in looking at it this other way that we have to push it because it's so unusual to us these days.
Yeah. I saw a hand. Yes, go ahead.
Hi. Until recently, I was associated with Deutsche Welle Academy's Retail and Social Media project, where we explore challenges for newsrooms who do not engage constructively online with their audiences. And one of the challenges is that the users abandon those social media platforms. Which got me thinking is that how much of a responsibility should a newsroom have firstly when engaging with such challenges to engage constructively with their audiences, and secondly, what happens to smaller newsrooms who do not have the resources to do so?
Well, you have to engage with your audience. That's very important. But you don't have to engage with everybody, you know? So you have to differentiate. And what we noticed, for example, our TikTok channel Planet A, which is a constructive, also again about environmental topics, we get many positive reactions and interactions, questions, somebody answers again and so on. It goes back and forth, so there community management makes a lot of sense. But if you have many trolls in your community and they just publish insults, because it's Russian trolls or wherever they come from, then you can't really engage. But you have to have people who know what to do. So if you have a channel and you can't provide community management, then it's difficult. You shouldn't have a channel then. I can understand that one doesn't use the channel anymore, that one closes it, you know.
Yes. Of course, you have a TikTok superstar at Deutsche Welle, right?
Yes, I think she's sitting
here.
there.
Yeah, we're going to be on TikTok today because she's here. I know it. I follow her.
Hi,
yeah.
Joanna.
Joanna. Thank you for being here. Yes, questions, please.
Thank you. I'll use the mic for the sake of the videographers. So I had a conversation with a journalist in Northern Ireland. This is a general, it's not constructive journalism specific, but it's about KPIs and about sustainability and convincing editors. And the intuition is, with social media and all the quote free news, the news that's out there for everyone to consume online, then it's hard to convince consumers to pay for the news, let alone constructive journalism. But this is Sam McBride from now with the Belfast Telegraph. But he looked at the numbers, we're talking about KPIs, and he saw that, because you can measure about how far down a page people read your story online. And he actually found that behind the paywalls, people who pay, the paying subscribers, would actually read the full story. Non-paying readers don't, right, and won't. But those who, and this was discussed earlier today, about the people who are actually genuinely interested in the news and getting a broader perspective, they'll pay for it. So I'd like to hear from any of you who have experience with paywalls and paying subscribers about maybe what some of your KPIs or discoveries are in regards to those who are paying for your service, what stories they're reading, do they go to the bottom of the page, etc. Thank you.
Can I give that to you? Yes.
Yes. My answer is going to be very America-based, and I don't yet have a sense if media has been scrambled to the degree in Europe that it has been in the United States. Basically, the news model in the United States has collapsed, and the whole news industry is being completely redone because of exactly what you're talking about, is people just won't want to pay for news. And so if you don't want to pay for news, then, and then obviously you've got Google coming in and taking away the ads, and then you have no revenue base. So what you're trying to do is you're trying to get people to engage. Obviously, you need to, if you have a paywall, you first need to get them, and you're talking about an online news source, you first have to get them to come back once if you want to get them to subscribe. Here we go. The KPIs we use 4 KPIs. The first one is return visits, which means, do they come a second time? Or if they don't, that's called bounce rate, which means they just bounce off and then you've never seen them again. They just skip off the atmosphere and then fly off. You want to have them come back. Then the second is called stop rate, which means, do they hit your paywall? For us, you get 3 articles before you hit the paywall. So that means, have they clicked on a 4th story? Then after that, it's newsletter signups, because newsletters tend to be our best way to get people to go from a non-paying relationship to a paying relationship. Because basically it's like leasing with an option to buy. They get a chance to kind of test drive our journalism without having to pay for it, and if they like it, then that moves us on. And then the last is subscriptions, which is the most obvious. And so what you're constantly, at least what we're constantly trying to do is, kind of one of the phrases, you make yourself more sticky, you know, that people come and they stay. And so you are looking for ways to get people to go deeper and create an engagement with you. And as we've been struggling I'm going to take it back to constructive journalism just because that's so much a part of our DNA, that that's all that we do. But my sense is each publication is, at least in America now, is a niche publication. You basically have the New York Times and everyone else. So the New York Times gets to be the New York Times, and everyone else has to figure out where they fit in. Everyone else is niche. And so you have to figure out what your niche is and then what your readers want in that niche. And that's going to be different for everyone, so there's no universal answer. But our niche very much is in the constructive journalism space. So one of the things that we did is we asked your question, what is constructive journalism? Because if something is constructive to one person, it could be non-constructive to someone else. And what we came to is that we felt like at the core of our journalism was the universality of humanity. Was that what brings people to the monitor is what binds humanity together, because that's what we report on. So we realized, what is it that brings humanity together? Their qualities, their honesty, respect, compassion, justice. These qualities are things that everyone wants, and that to us, what constructive journalism is journalism that helps expand these qualities. So we ended up doing something called a respect project, because we looked at and we said, what's the quality going on in society right now that people need the most of? And in the United States, where we're horribly polarized and have a toxic political culture, we said respect. Our KPIs went through the roof. So then we did it again, and this was right at the end of the pandemic. We did resilience. We did something called finding resilience, and the KPIs went up again. And so that was just an example, as for our niche, really focusing on something that's constructive and we think is really feeding our demographic, our readers, did help us become more sticky.
I think that's probably the best way of having an argument for using constructive journalism ever, because this is any, let's say, person that would be doubting, or any editor that you would talk to, I'm going to play this little clip because it's very, very clear. And the KPIs are also, we haven't defined the KPIs, but it's really interesting. They say they go up, which means your indicators show that you're doing the right thing. Do you ever encounter a moment where it doesn't go up, where the KPIs go down?
Most of the time it doesn't. At least for us, our journalism is completely scrambled, and just trying to make journalism work, there's only a handful of organizations, journalistic organizations in the United States that make money. Most don't, or they did make money and it's going down, down, down. They're cutting. Right. So the trend line is, for almost everyone, is in the wrong direction. And I think at least within that environment, most of what you try isn't going to work. You have to keep trying. I remember Yeah.
You have to be courageous
Yes.
Yeah.
while
And
trying.
persistent.
Yeah. Good.
Yeah, but if it,
I think it's also, for us, it's also we attract more talent. That's also important, you know. Young people know what kind of reporting we are doing, and they come to us. I know when we select our volunteers, for example, the people we train at Deutsche Welle, they often mention constructive stories. So obviously they have read them or watched them or whatever, and that's why they come to us. So that's very interesting for me. So it attracts talent because young people are more interested, I think, in constructive stories.
Okay.
And just to connect that with the question that the woman here asked about social media and how does a small organization do this when they don't have lots of resources, it's hard. But again, and things might be different outside the United States, but no matter what you do in the United States, it's going to be hard. And what we see, and I don't know if this is starting to happen in Europe or other places in the world too, but what we see in the United States is what's called news avoiders, which means they're just turning it off. Someone was saying, I just can't deal with this anymore. I think it was you saying your daughter.
Yeah, my son. Yeah.
And so those are people you're losing. If you just kind of keep going the same way in the United States, you say, if it bleeds, it leads, you know, which is the way of thinking of journalism in a lot of cases. If you just go with that, you're going to be losing market share. So try something else. It's going to be hard no matter what. But if all these people are leaving journalism because they hate what they're seeing, well, maybe we should try something else.
Yeah, yeah. But yeah, it's the breaking news every minute, kind of. Yeah, it makes you numb. Is that? Do you get that question asked? People that are not in you have friends outside journalism, and then they say, "Oh, news. Oh, you work in news. Oh, yeah, that must be hard, or not."
Yes, but it's the same. I have some friends, and I know them. They were really interesting in news and politics. And just a few months ago, I call her and she said, "Oh, what are you doing?" I say, "Oh, Ukraine." So, "Oh, well, I don't watch any news more." I say, "What?"
Yeah.
And she was so interested before, and she's not anymore. And that's at this point I realize we really have a problem, a big problem. Yeah, I will say maybe we are on the most biggest crisis in journalism we have at the moment, and we have to think about trust. And what I told before, if the viewers told us, "Oh, you don't report about the whole reality," we have a problem in trust relationship with the viewers, and that's the point what you told. Then we lost them. And at this point, we have a problem. And then we talk about at the end, could we survive as journalists, as a media company? And that's a problem. That's one of the reasons we think it's part of the job, it's part of the reality. So we have to report constructive stories, or it must not be a whole constructive story. I would extend this word, because maybe it's just a question. Ask for solutions. Yeah. Don't ask for opinions. Yeah, that's what I said the last months in Germany, and this big discussion about the Heizungsgesetz, the heater law. It was terrible. We just waste valuable airtime with opinions from politics, and they just say, "Oh, you're stupid. The others are stupid." Yeah, but that's no solution. Yeah. Ask for the solution.
That's
the problem. Yeah.
It's like a drug.
Yeah,
you know, it's watching that. It's like a car wreck. You know, you watch and you can't turn away, but at the end, it hasn't given you anything of value. And that's what we see from the viewers, is that they kind of watch that, but at some point they just tune out.
I think we have to think about our attitude. Yeah, we have to change our attitude in the journalism. That's the problem, and that's the problem you asked before, to convince colleagues to make the decision. No. We wouldn't add this soundbite, this interview. Yeah, of course, it's a good story. Maybe it's a headline. Yeah. When some people say, "Oh, the chancellor, he's stupid," whatever. But ask for the solution. Where is your solution? Okay, I know, I could understand you hate them, you want to come to power. What is your solution? Yeah. Please show me a solution. What's your business plan? Yeah. Concrete solution.
I think it's the storytelling. We have to change our storytelling, you know, widen our perspective. 2 days ago, I heard a story on radio. It started with, "The body bags are taken out of," and I turned off. I have to admit that. I just couldn't handle it. And that was a pity. I'm sure probably it was very important. I'm sure it was an important story, but I just couldn't listen to it. It was too much, even for me, who's used to news. That's why I mean, you need a different kind of storytelling also to get everything over in the best sense and show many perspectives in the story also.
Yeah. I'm going to turn to the audience one more time because we're in the last 5 minutes. If I keep time well, I see lots of hands. We start with you, please.
I keep on wondering while I'm listening if to me somehow constructive journalism is in opposition to actuality, like why are the horrible stories of earthquakes, and this is because it happened today. It's like it cannot wait to talk about this earthquake, which is a horrible story, and the story about the children and the children being entertained or something is something you could do the next day. So in my experience, the things that cannot wait take precedence because you need to be on the same. If your organization doesn't talk about the Moroccan earthquake or something, it's like not possible basically to leave it out. So I'm wondering if you can see this opposition in a way. I'm not sure. I'm just thinking aloud, basically.
News is so important, and we have to be there first. That this comes first, and then later the stories. Is that a good trend?
Basically, you can talk about it doesn't matter if you talk about the children being entertained at the station. If you do this today, or if you do it at 12 o'clock tomorrow, it's something you can always sort of
postpone.
Push.
Yeah,
yes.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
I think what we found is you need both. It's not an either or. And again, that goes to the fullness of the news. But we recently, gosh, it was like a year ago, we tested a newsletter that we're always trying to change things to try and optimize our KPIs. And so we were testing a newsletter, and we tested, and the top of the newsletter was just straight news. It was a time of COVID, so it was probably something that President Biden did about COVID or President Trump or something. And then the bottom of the newsletter was what kind of our value stories, that we're talking about something that was about courage or about honesty or something like that. And I remember the person who was running the test, we were doing it as user testing. I remember they tried to get the readers to choose. They said, which one do you like better? And almost all of them said, I want both. Because they said, I need to know what happened. I can't just float around not knowing what happened in the world. But this other thing is the stuff that kind of gets me through. These are the things that kind of enrich and deepen and broaden my sense of what's going on in the world. So I don't think it needs to be an either or. I think it's a both. And I think what I would go further and say, when you're just doing the regular news, don't do it from a sense of people don't have agency, there is no solution. There's a certain tone that can happen to news when you are hopeless. And I would say, even when you're doing that original first take on Morocco, just be straight. And I think the tone of it certainly can matter. I know in the United States politics, tone is huge. It's what tone are you conveying in what you do. And I think that can be done. You can have a constructive tone, even if the story is just a very normal story.
I just wanted to add, just shortly after the earthquake happened, one of our best performing stories was how sport can help people who have to deal with depression, surprisingly, And we all thought, of course, the earthquake stories would perform best. No, it was just the other stories what people wanted to read. Mm-hmm. Surprise.
I had 2 hands up somewhere, there. Yes, and another one, or two questions. I'm going to take both questions, so you have to be very short because time is, it's not never up, but it's, there you go.
The question is essentially, isn't this more a question of...
yes,
sorry,
please. Thank you.
Isn't this more a question of a cultural shift? Because, of course, as an industry, we've developed a certain culture and we've rewarded certain behaviors and certain products on the basis of delivering what the expectations are. Right. And what we're trying to do right now is to come about with a cultural shift that leads to the change we want to create. So if you could just maybe say something about that.
I'm envious for your question. Really good. And can you also give the microphone so we do 2 questions in one?
Yeah, thank you very much. Today in another talk, somebody said you have to change how ads are related to content in online media. So as long as content is related to the number of clicks, it's difficult to get creative constructive content online. Once you change it to time, the relation to time, you get more good content. What do you think about this?
Yeah. We start. It's a bit of combination. Culture changed the way of doing it, and the clicks. Yeah, who goes first? Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
I mean, clicks are not the KPI for us. I mean, of course, you need clicks so that somebody sees your content, but the question is, how does this person engage with you? How long, as you were saying, he or she stays with the content and so on? That is important, you know. And will he or she come back? So, click is just a very little thing.
Yeah.
And as I said, we noticed the fast stories or the news stories don't perform particularly well.
Yeah.
They probably perform for 2 or 3 hours, but then it quickly goes down, and that's it.
Yeah. You've been doing this since 1912, so I skipped you. I tried. I wanted to know how old you are now. Culture change, yes. Is that something that you understand? Is it something that you have to unlearn something? Now that we see it, we can change it? First we become aware, and then we hopefully change how we do it?
Yes. I think it's not necessary to change the whole news. I think that's what you said before. When something happened, we have to report about this. And we have a checklist at RTL. Think about constructive stories. And the first question is the problem well known by the viewers? Do they know what we are talking about? And then we could looking for solutions. And I think it's really important at the moment that we change a lot in our attitude, thinking about stories, looking for solutions, and it's a big step. Sometimes I ask my colleagues, why do you tell the story? Why you don't tell the story constructive? Oh, we forgot to think about. I say, okay, no problem. So then we have to talk about this in the future, next time. So, and that's the way what we try. Remember again, anytime, and then that's what we try to change. We try to change the mindset inside a house.
Good.
Yeah.
So first, the mindset is more important than KPIs, or is that a little bit too harsh conclusion?
Well, you KPIs. That means I need to speak, right?
All right.
To the first question there,
we finish with the KPIs.
To the first question there, I actually think those are completely linked. Is that we are hearing from certainly in the United States with the people who are news avoiders, we are hearing from our customers, we no longer like your product and approach. And is our culture going to stop us from serving those people? That's a ridiculous business model. That we don't like, our culture doesn't like that kind of journalism, so we're not going to do what our customers are asking us to do. Mm-hmm. That's ridiculous.
Yeah.
We just need to do it.
Yeah. Thank you. It's a great moment to thank you, because we are at the end of the time slot. Gordian, Mark, Manuela, thank you very much. Feel free to ask them. This is also a place where we talk and meet up into not just on stage but also in the hallway. Thank you so much for giving us a view on constructive journalism, KPIs, and culture change. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.